everyone, Alexa Donne here, and today I am going to be talking a bit about what inspired me to write, to become a writer, and some of the steps I took along the pathway to what ended up being the goal of writing and publishing books. This actually came from a user submitted question I posted on my community tab. Like, I do this every so often to see, because sometimes you guys give me amazing ideas for videos, and there's something about the way this question was phrased that made me think. It was literally, would love to know what inspired you to become a writer and what steps you took to achieve your goals. I've definitely done some videos talking about some of the journey stuff, and I've like thrown in like little anecdotes in different videos, but I realized I haven't ever really talked about this, and it could be really interesting. Some of these are perhaps concrete things that may help you. Others, I just generally hope this serves as a good example for those of you out there. My journey is going to more closely align with someone who didn't decide when they were, say, 15 or 16, I'm going to be a novelist, and then just like took concrete steps to get there. I didn't start out that way. I'm going to talk about some of the inspiration in the journey. I wanted to be a journalist for a very long time, and the bulk of kind of my foundational writing experience and some of the things I did were on that side, kind of essay writing, narrative nonfiction, persuasive writing skills, research, deadlines, etc. I have found that they have really helped me in my novel writing, but I came to the goal of writing books quite late. I was in my mid-20s, but we're going to talk about that. But bearing that in mind, I've decided to kind of break down the specific steps I took by middle school / high school, college, post-college but pre-novel, meaning before I decided to write a novel. Then I'm going to talk about those steps pre-novel, so before I successfully finished a book, all the stuff that I did. Then I'm going to talk about the things I did once I had completed my first draft of my first novel. And so essentially everything before pre-novel, which I was about 25, so it was about 2008, everything before that, all of my goals were becoming a journalist. But like, what are my origins of being a writer? So the thing is, most of us who are writers, we've always been writers. So I certainly have those stories about, oh, when I was a kid, I was writing fan fiction. I had no clue I was writing fan fiction. And yeah, I wrote Babysitter's Club novels because I loved those books. I was a voracious reader. So really, the number one you are going to see as a thread through all of these is I've always been a reader. I started as a reader. Most of us start as readers, and so I've just always devoured books. And I tried to think about it, and I think I did briefly when I was probably like 8 or 9-ish think, oh, I want to be an author. But at the same time, I also wanted to be an actress / singer because I actually wanted to be Michelle Pfeiffer. So like, it was kind of that period of my life where I either wanted to be Anne M. Martin, Babysitter's Club, Hive, or Michelle Pfeiffer. These were like realistic, concrete, real aspirations that I had. I was a kid. So once it kind of turned more into what do I actually want to do, I settled on journalism. I focused on journalism because I loved writing, but I didn't actually really see myself as a fiction writer. I didn't see myself as a fiction writer until my mid to late 20s when I started writing, not just writing fiction. Like, for me, it really took completing that first book to feel like, oh, I guess I can write fiction. I never felt that that's where my strengths lay. So I do think it's worth pointing out, like, you're gonna have those like self-owns, the vulnerabilities, the things that you kind of nag yourself on, and part of the journey is proving yourself wrong, proving that you can actually do the things that you want to do. And that's a whole other separate video we could talk about identifying your strengths and weaknesses and blah, 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 blah. Point is, middle school, high school, steps I took towards achieving my goal. Bearing in mind that some of these are just things I did because I loved writing. There was no goal attached to it until I figured out, oh, I think I want to be a journalist. So I read a ton. These were very formative years for reading. It's when I read Jane Eyre. It's when I read Jane Austen, Bridget Jones, Harry Potter, so many books, plus all the books I had to read for school. I didn't hate all of them. I read some good ones there. Like, I ended up loving Tess of the D'Urbervilles. I really like Flannery O'Connor. Gatsby is okay. We did Shakespeare units. I mean, like everyone, we read Romeo and Juliet, but I ended up really loving Hamlet. So just literary exploration and reading a lot. Very important here. And this isn't specific to writing, but storytelling. This is also the period where I became very obsessive with like movies and TV. So I have been obsessively ingesting story pretty much my entire life. I am not that person who's gonna say like you shouldn't watch a lot of TV. I was the kid watching at least 6 hours of TV a day from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, while still accomplishing all my homework, getting good grades, and reading books. TV can be good for you. So next, I entered essay contests anytime there were those opportunities. Now, not because I was super like ambitious, my teachers encouraged me. So perhaps this will help you take the initiative if you are in middle school or high school. If you see opportunities to enter basically writing competitions, shoot your shot. But I'm very grateful that I did have teachers who encouraged me because I won a couple of them. There was one, I don't remember what it was, but I do know I had to go to another high school to like, we sat in the library and it was like a timed essay thing and I won that. There was a Georgia Governor's Honors and my English teacher encouraged me to try out for that, and I got that. Though I didn't get to go because I got a scholarship to go to Germany for a year, which is a whole other thing that has nothing to do with writing. But those really helped my confidence. I attended a journalism camp at UGA, same thing. I went because I was interested and I was thinking about college already. I attended that the early part of the summer between sophomore and junior year. Then I went to Germany shortly after that, and I just drunk it in. We took workshops and classes, we did reporting, and I did end up winning an award for a persuasive writing piece that I wrote. And so that, again, it really helped my confidence to go, okay, journalism is definitely something I should pursue. I'm okay at this kind of writing, which led me toward college. But before that, throughout this period, I was writing fan fiction. I wrote Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan fiction, I think from 14 to 16-ish, 14 to 17-ish. I wasn't hyper prolific, not on the level that I ended up being in Harry Potter, and even in Harry Potter, which comes later, I was never as prolific as most other people. But definitely Buffy fanfic was my first real foray into fiction writing as kind of a teenager, and like it wasn't great, I won't lie. I was writing like script format, which now I'm like, that is bad, but I was writing things I loved, I was posting them to the internet, and it was a lot of fun. It was my first experiences kind of really playing with tropes, so that was very good. And I wrote for my school newspaper. I joined senior year. I would have done it junior year if I'd been there, but I was in Germany. So senior year, I was on the writing staff for my school newspaper. So college. I got into Boston University for journalism. It has a very highly respected and well-ranked journalism school, specifically for the journalism school. At the time, it was definitely top 3. I don't know what it is now, but I went to college and majored in journalism and I freaking loved it. I gotta tell you, like a vocationally based major around writing is super fun. You don't have to spend as much on books because most of your classes are writing classes. You don't really read textbooks. So we would have to get like paperbacks, and I legit still have one from college. In defense of elitism, I marked it up with little post-its. This was assigned reading for one of my classes. It was actually a great class. It was a media criticism class where we were encouraged to really think about media bias. That was one of the best classes I took. It was actually a graduate level class that I took as a sophomore. I loved that class. I joined the school newspaper. The newspaper at BU was the Daily Free Press. I got into it sophomore year. I went straight for the entertainment section because by that point I was like, I want to be a film critic. And so I went all in, and then I also ended up being a section editor for the last 2 years of college. So I was doing layout, assigning stories, editing work in addition to writing. Oh, my favorite semester though was the semester I was a film editor. I wanted to be film editor instead of editing the entire entertainment section, just so I could go to press screenings 2 to 3 times a week and write a ton of film reviews. That was amazing. I loved that. I did internships. One was with Variety, though in the ad sales department, it was not a writing internship, but that led to a writing internship where I was privileged to go to the Cannes Film Festival to be an editorial intern with Variety for the duration of the festival. I got a part-time job my senior year. I worked at the Boston Herald. So these are just kind of the writer-related things. There was other stuff I did, like I did an internship, study abroad program in London, but nothing super notable. But these were the things that I was doing on top of all of my classes, and I took a majority of my classes were writing discipline. There were classes on news reporting where you had to identify stories, research, interview people, and write reporting. I took feature writing classes. I wrote profiles of people. I did the film criticism, just tons and tons of writing in my journalism major, plus tons of writing in my other classes. I did take, you know, kind of the literature classes where you're reading and analyzing books. I also took a bunch of film classes for fun, so that was helpful too, having to analyze film technique and story. And all during this period, I wrote fan fiction. Now, I was balancing my college classes, so like when we get into the next period, which is post-college, that's when I really wrote a lot of fan fiction, but I started writing Harry Potter fan fiction when I was in college. Reading was actually really interesting during this period. This is the period of my life when I read the least that I really ever have in my entire life. And this is me saying to you, if you are a student, very often school is going to kill your joy and love of reading because all you have time and bandwidth for are all of those assigned reading books. That definitely happened to me in college, where I was just juggling a lot of things, and so the only books I really read for pleasure were Harry Potter and Jasper Fforde. I discovered Jasper Fforde, I think it might have been my senior year, but those were fantastic escape books that I could still kind of find the mental bandwidth for. I mean, Harry Potter books always came out in the summer, so I wasn't technically in classes, but honestly, during the year, I really just read whatever I had to for class, and that reading slump, because it basically created a reading slump, lasted for a few years. So let's talk about post-college. Bearing in mind, this whole time, I am not trying to write books. I am not interested in being a fiction writer. I don't even think I'm that good at it. I do Harry Potter fanfic purely for fun. I am gunning toward being a journalist. We are not gonna talk about the recession and the horrible job market I graduated into, but that post-college period, which is like 22 to 25, I wrote Harry Potter fanfiction for fun. I started working on Harry Potter fan conventions, which technically isn't like a writing thing, and it's not something where I went, I have a goal and I'm gonna do this thing, but it did end up helping me on my journey to being a published author. And in this period, so this is the pre-novel period, toward the end, a friend of mine introduced me to this fantastic new thing, YA fiction. When they like formally gave it a label is what I mean. When they created that section of Barnes & Noble, Cassie Clear's book had just come out, Holly Black was publishing, and my friend was super on top of it. We're both from Harry Potter fandom, but she like really got into it first, where she was like, oh, these people we know from Harry Potter fandom are publishing books. I'm gonna read them. And so she was like, you need to start reading these books. And I remember the one that she gave me. It was The Uglies. So The Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. And it was like, so I started devouring YA books. This is the most critical thing in this period, which I call post-college and pre-novel. I read voraciously, specifically in YA, which contributed to the path that I ended up going down. And as I read more and more YA, I mean, I was eating them like candy. I wasn't keeping track of my book counts at that time, but I had to have been reading at least 50 books a year consistently for 3, 4, 5 years. I just volume of YA novels. And so what ended up happening is, well, the more you read those books, you're gonna have less time for reading fan fiction. In general, Harry Potter fandom was starting to decline. Though in this period, which we're gonna finally talk about pre-novel, this is like the transition of, I started to think, well, maybe I could write a novel. And it was kind of tapering off of Harry Potter fandom, which wasn't a decline for many reasons. The last book had come out, I was disappointed in the last book. The Russians bought LiveJournal. LiveJournal turned into a total shit show. BNFs were leaving, so much drama. many, many reasons, and I was starting to kind of thinking of stepping away, especially because I was just getting interested in other things. And I started having plot bunnies for fic, right? But then going, this would work for an original story. Because I always loved AUs, alternate universe, basically things that were barely Harry Potter. I just wrote them in fandom because I was in a Harry Potter fandom, but they didn't have the magic system of Harry Potter. The characters were kind of transposed into these ideas that I had. And so there was one specific plot bunny that is still in my list of things that I eventually want to write, because it would have been an adult romance, essentially. And there was another one as well I started developing that was urban fantasy. And that's the thing, I started having plot bunnies that didn't fit Harry Potter. And I started thinking, well, why don't I write something original? And here's the thing, in the years before that, I legit thought to myself, I'm never gonna have an original idea. I'm satisfied with fan fiction. I don't need anything else. I'm not good enough to write original fiction. And you will feel that way until you don't feel that way. And it's just so funny how like there was just a day, and I don't remember what the day was, but clearly it happened, where there was just a plot bunny that popped into my head and I went, oh, that's an original idea. And it just kind of went from there. I got excited about something and I started thinking, maybe I could write a novel. And it helped that I had other friends from Harry Potter fandom who were kind of going in the same direction. We all loved writing, and we were thinking, do we want to write original novels? And yeah, people like Cassie Clare and Sarah Reese Brennan were definitely role models as well. Naomi Novik, of people who we knew from Harry Potter fandom, who I wasn't a Cassie stan, but I loved Sarah Reese Brennan. And it was kind of like, maybe we can write original novels. So we're in the pre-novel phase. Steps I took. So the first step I took is I gathered, I think it was 4 or 5 of my friends from Harry Potter fandom, like who had been either beta readers of mine, I beta read them, or they beta read me, or they were just Spanish friends who I knew were working on original material. And I said, do you want to form a writers group? Because, you know, that's what people do. They join writers groups. And it helped that one of those friends of mine did Clarion, and so like she was like very smart about like workshopping and all that kind of stuff. And so I think it was 2008. It was 2008 or 2009 when I did this, and I tried to gather us together. I started a Tumblr for our writing journey. I had all of these like ideas that we would have like check-ins for writing our novels, and like deadlines where we would want to exchange them, and I'll just tell you, it utterly failed. So it's a step I took toward my goal, because by this point I had a goal. I wanted to write fiction. I wanted to write novels. It just didn't go anywhere. This was the start of me learning, and it was a learning process I had over 3 or 4 years until I finally finished a book, of you can't rely on other people to keep you motivated. The idea was that we would motivate each other to write our novels, because that's how it worked in fan fiction. Fan fiction fandom is very collaborative, and often you would have your beta readers to cheer you on and brainstorm and bounce ideas off, but that just didn't really end up working in this original fiction writers group, because we were at different points in our journeys, we have different writing styles. And I'll give you like spoiler alert. So that was 2008, 2009, and it is now 2020. And out of that group, I am one of, so I think there were 4 or 5 of us, 5 or 6. Half have never completed an original novel to this day. 1 wrote a thing and doesn't write anymore. Original fiction. And the 3rd, my very closest friend, I have been cheering her on, and she finally finished a draft of a story this year. She's amazing, by the way. She's probably gonna surpass me in every possible way. But like, the journey takes different lengths of time, but also what you're gonna find when you join writers groups, but also when you find people on the internet, because I'm gonna talk about some of the other steps I took with like critique partners and whatnot. It's gonna take a lot of trial and error to find the writers who are on your exact wavelength and more or less functioning on your same timeline. More often than not, especially in the early days of kind of having friends who are all aspiring as you are aspiring, is some people are gonna jump ahead, some people are gonna be left behind, some people are gonna fizzle out, and you can't rely on those other people to do it for you. So in this pre-novel era, I tried the writing group, I tried following lots of different writing advice, I kind of tried outlining, I tried different methods, I attempted to write, I think 4 different books. I got like 10 to 20K into 2 of them. The one I got the furthest on, 20K, was a YA dystopia, and I mean, luckily I gave up on it right before the bottom fell out of YA dystopia, but I got stalled on it. But in this period, I continued to read a ton. I was still really devouring YA. I joined the DragonCon YA literature staff. So these are things I did because I enjoyed them. It wasn't in my head, this is gonna help me get published. But again, they did end up helping me get published. So in terms of like goal setting, it shouldn't always be transactional. Like, if I do this, it's gonna lead to this, but I highly encourage you to do things as you are pursuing your love of writing and your writing goals that facilitate that, but that you genuinely enjoy. So I did not join the DragonCon YA Lit staff to get a book deal, but it helped me with a lot of author stuff. Like, it helped me gain confidence just speaking to writing professionals. I did forge some friendships with writing professionals. I learned how to moderate panels, which has made me so much better at public speaking. Like, I am not afraid of book events at all because I moderated so many panels. I got to watch authors I really admired be good on panels. I picked up tips and tricks. But also moderating panels, you have to learn to ask interesting questions about other people's books. You have to read those books. You have to be very aware of kind of genre and convention. So, I mean, that was just a fantastic experience for me, learning so much more about the industry and the market. And I highly recommend volunteering with any kind of bookish type of things. In this time, I also organized a YA literature track for a Harry Potter convention that a friend was organizing, and put a pin in that. That ends up being very, very important. I found a couple of new CPs in this time because I'd realized that the previous writing group, I mean, this is years later, it wasn't gonna work. So I found a couple new people who were also kind of in the same YA writing space. I should have mentioned that writers group I put together, we weren't all writing the same kind of books, which does often end up being important, kind of making sure you're all on the same page. So several things happened all at once, more or less in 2011, 2012, that became very, very important. I did Nano for the first time. It was either 2011 or 2012, and though I did not win Nano, it was essential because that's how I ended up buying Scrivener, which was a game changer for me. Part of my problem was writing in Microsoft Word. I just didn't know it because of how my brain kind of works. Next, all of that trial and error of trying different outline methods, looking at different advice, trying to form a writing habit, figure out what worked for me. I found something that worked for me, and it was on Jim Butcher's live journal, and I've talked about it on this channel. I kind of made my own version, the story curve, but it's essentially that. It's just you take a piece of paper, you draw a curve, and you plot your book along it. So essentially, I found the thing that unlocked what I now know is discovery writing, or pantsing with a very, very loose structure, i.e. planning, obviously concept and character, but inciting, incident, midpoint, turn, thinking about the climax, and it finally helped me to finish a goddamn book. The other thing that really helped me finish a book, that Harry Potter convention, it was called Ascendio. And again, remember, I was reading YA voraciously. I had my finger on the pulse. I invited people who I thought were really talented and interesting, who I knew were Harry Potter fans. I invited agents to come down. So like that con, Libba Bray was there, Veronica Roth was there, Joanna Volpe was there. It was just so great, and I created all the panels for the YA literature track. I basically got to create my dream programming and put people on them, and I went to all those panels and I listened to these industry professionals talk about things. I was able to have one-on-one conversations with multiple literary agents because they're lovely and friendly, and I was drinking in all of this information, but also inspiration. It was a real kick in the pants for me, because if you see it enough, if you see what you want enough, eventually, hopefully, it'll kick you in the pants. It'll either do that or defeat you, but I am not a defeatist. And so you can either be consumed with jealousy and wanting and give up, or you can be like, if I want it, I have to do it. And so at Ascendio, I had some really great conversations with literary agents. I worked up the courage to pitch to one of them, and they told me my idea sounded great. And you know, you shouldn't need external validation, but it gave me some external validation and some motivation, and I set myself a goal. That was summer, that would have been July 2012, and I set myself the goal. I was gonna finish the book I'd been working on. Oh, it must have been 2011 Nano I did, because I definitely had been working on it for like 7 or 8 months at that point. What ended up being my first ever book. And I was like, I'm going to finish it by the end of 2012. I set it as a real goal, and I basically had to figure out how to meet it. I'd already been doing some pushing myself to write daily. I hadn't discovered writing sprints yet. I don't know when I discovered those, but the point is, I set a goal. I decided I wanted to query in early 2013. I wanted to enter pitch contests. So that's what I did. So I finally finished a very messy first draft of my first ever book in the early part. It was either January or February 2013. I know it was January or February because the next thing I did is something that I don't recommend you do, but you wanted to know the steps I took to achieve my goal. So I entered Pitch Madness with a book I had finished a week before and not edited. I don't recommend you do that, but I did do that, which means you're probably gonna do it. You still shouldn't, but I did. And what that did was force me to revise my book brutally, honestly, and quickly, because I got picked for Pitch Madness. Oh no. Oh yes, but oh no. And that friend of mine, who's one of my ride or dies, was such a good critique partner. Bless her. She read my book in like 48 hours. And she gave it to me straight. It remains some of the best CP feedback I have ever gotten in my life. It was hard to hear, but this friend of mine told me my pacing was a mess and she was very bored for a large majority of the book. Only your really good friends can tell you that. And the thing is, I trusted her because she's a very good writer. She's a very good writer, by the way. The world is not ready for her books, which she is going to be querying soon, and I'm very, very excited. But this was trial by fire, and it has forged me as a power reviser. This is where my love of revision was born, when I started to realize, oh, the hardest part for me is just vomiting that draft out, because God, I love revision. I did a quick and dirty, intense revision on it to get me ready for Pitch Madness. I mean, that kind of gets into the how I got my first agent conversation, but I got that manuscript ready for Pitch Madness. Also in this time, I did read Save the Cat, the original Save the Cat, the screenwriting one, not the novel one. I did not really like it, except I liked the beat sheet, and this is kind of when that started to like sink in to my brain and my writing ish. I did try actually, so after that first book, kind of skipping ahead, like once I had an agent, I did get an agent for it, and I was writing another book. I tried to outline my second project based off of the beat sheet, and I failed on a couple of ideas. So this, again, I was still doing the trial and error. Yeah, I pant/discovery wrote that first book, but I was still trying to become an outliner and realizing what did and didn't work for me. But I do think the process of trying to use the beat sheet to outline is part of what kind of got it into my brain, so that's good work. Also in that period, backing up again, I did the writer's voice, which is another mentorship thing. That's actually how I ended up getting my agent. In that period, I also did the Miss Snark's First Victim agent critique. The irony being the secret agent ended up being the agent who already had my material from the writer's voice, so I ended up signing with, so that's kind of funny. And very critically, so the next step I took toward my goal, a big one for you. So remembering, I have a completed manuscript at this point. I'm very seriously revising it because I'm querying. I want an agent. I got new critique partners. As I mentioned, it's gonna be very natural. And even in this post-book pre-agent period, but then I also had my going on sub and not selling and then writing another book and like leaving that agent and having to get another one. In this whole period, there was kind of an ebb and flow of critique partners. You're going to have a lot of trial and error of finding the fellow writers, both aspiring and beyond aspiring, that you really click with, who you love their stuff and they love your stuff and your feedback styles match and you really get something constructive out of the relationship, not just for your writing, but also hopefully you like each other as humans and you are friends. And sometimes it's gonna gel, more often it's not, especially in the beginning. In particular, just the natural ebb and flow, as I mentioned from that other writers group, but it continued to happen even as I was finding new critique partners, people who had written novels. We were on the same step, writing similar types of work. Some of them are going to kind of fall away after the creating process as well. So I got new CPs, but a majority of them no longer write books. So just that is a natural part of the process, but I did find a couple of my ride or dies, like really close critique partners who made a huge difference for improving my work, forging friendships. I loved helping them get agents, and so that kind of boosted me into like the next phase. So it was very critical for me, essentially getting more critique partners, continuing to try to find the critique partners who were at the same level in terms of their writing, ambitions, goals, so that we were then able to basically grow together and go on the publishing journey together. Also in here, worth noting, this is the period where I joined Reddit and I got into the YA Writers subreddit, which I ended up becoming a mod of around that same time, like 2013, 2014, which was very helpful. Again, very similar to DragonCon, which I was still doing through this period of just familiarizing, knowing the market, reading a lot, reaching out to professionals because we would have them come on the subreddit to do AMAs, facilitating discussion, and all of this helped me kind of just be super on top of things. But of course I did it because I enjoyed it, but no lies, it ended up going into my bio and my query, and it's really useful and good to show how engaged you are with the writing community, with the publishing community. You are engaged, but also all of that stuff you do because you like it, not because it's resume padding, genuinely helps you to improve your craft, to improve your business savvy, and ends up helping you with your career. From here, I've definitely kind of told the rest of the story, the how I got my agent, my first one, and being on sub and not selling, and we parted ways after that second book because we just weren't gelling together on that book, and then no one else wanted it. I mean, I've talked about it before, and yet that still remains kind of my best lesson of like, you can love a project you work on so much and you can grow so much writing it. I grew so much as a writer writing that book. It was really a pure, proper discovery writing process. It's the one where I really thought about pacing before I started. I thought about act structure before I started, but I still discovery wrote all the fun parts. I had a blast writing it. I was really proud of it. I was like, this is my best work. At the time, I was like, this is the best I will ever do, which is patently untrue. Don't tell yourself that because you are gonna sell yourself short. And it was really devastating when it went nowhere. It's still kind of a one that got away, though I can look at it with hindsight and go, man, I really improved at writing after that book. So it ended up being a really critical bridge book for me. So I guess in terms of steps I took toward achieving my goal, I let go of that book. And that was actually the essential final step of achieving my goal, if we consider the goal simply getting a book deal, selling a book. That was critical. It was really hard. And I've told the story before. I didn't think I was ready to write Brightly Burning, Jane Eyre in Space, because I thought it was gonna be a literary magnum opus, but I'm not a literary writer. I'm still not a literary writer, and that was 5 years ago. But at the time, so from like 2013 to 2015, because I had the idea, I was like, I'm not a good enough writer to write this very good idea. I'll wait. Glad I didn't wait, because I would still be waiting. And so I guess technically, other than giving up the second book that I loved a lot, the final step I took toward my goal was I decided to be fearless. I decided to write the book that I wanted to write, even though I didn't think I was good enough to write it. I questioned my own skills and my own abilities, but I decided to have fun. I decided to write this cool idea that I really enjoyed and have fun writing it. And it ended up really paying off. So I will stop myself there. There's tons of other stuff, but it's more or less been chronicled on this channel. Yeah, that is what inspired me to become a writer, kind of in a meandering way. Oh, I forgot the actual thing that inspired me to write books. I've said this before in videos. I'll sneak it in here right at the end. Twilight? Because I didn't like it. Twilight and a couple of other YA books. Honestly, sometimes the best inspiration is when you read a book you don't like and you measure kind of yourself against it, whether you are correct or not, by the way, whatever it takes to kick you in the pants, and you decide for yourself, if that's published, I could be published. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, but that motivation to try is what matters. And so sadly it was Twilight, and I know that's such a cliche thing, but it's like, I know many writers who were inspired by Twilight. I choose to take it positively, even though there's a bit of a neg in there because I personally didn't care for the writing itself. But I recognized the storytelling being something that a lot of people loved, that was very compelling, that got an agent, that got a book deal, that was a bestseller. And that was really important for me because I did have a lot of hangups. That whole period of, I wrote fanfic for fun but didn't think I was great at it. I was pursuing journalism, not as a consolation prize or anything. I love journalism and honestly I'm pretty good at it. It does benefit a lot of my skills as a writer, but part of that was definitely I did not think I was good enough to write fiction because I thought good books, good fiction was all beautiful and literary, like the books that you have to read in school. And so Twilight was important in so many ways because it was a reminder. The whole YA kind of category is that, and that's why I love it so much. It's not always, you know, the most beautiful prose. It's the compelling story, it's the engaging story, it's the commercial concept, it's fast pacing, and I love commercial concepts, and I love kind of character driven stuff, and I love romance, and Twilight gave me the confidence I needed to really give it a go. So thanks, Twilight. So that was fun. Thank you to Marissa Nicole for asking me this. Like, something about the way you framed the question made me go, oh, that could be really interesting to talk about. And now you know, you don't have to be burning with desire to be a published author from the time you're 8 or you're behind. Literally didn't occur to me until I was 25 or 26. I didn't finish a book till I was 29. I think I was 32, 33 when I got my current agent, and I didn't sell that book. How old was I? Hold on, what is time? I think I was 32 when I got my agent, 33 when I sold my book, and 34 when it came out. Like, you know what? You get that inspiration to write a book whenever you get that inspiration to write a book, and hopefully some of the actionable steps I took will help you as well. The number one thing, honestly, is to read. That is the common thread in every period other than my college reading slump, though technically I was reading during college, just Harry Potter, Jasper Fforde, and whatever was assigned for school. Reading. Reading is the number one. What really enabled me to make the transition was devouring hundreds of YA books over the course of a couple years. So whatever your category or genre is, you have to read voraciously, and then critique partners. Like between like reading critique partners and like continually seeking out critique partners, not just like trying it once and giving up because your writing group didn't work out, plus experimenting with advice and craft. All the stuff that failed, and a lot of it did, still helped me figure out how the heck to what my writing process was and how I could write a book. And that's partly why I have this channel, why AuthorTube is great, because you should not just listen to me. You should listen to a ton of other people and try all the different things and be like, that's bad, that's bad, that's bad. Ooh, that surprisingly worked. Whatever, basically good advice is advice that works for you. And so that trial and error, which was a couple years of my writing journey, was very, very useful. It was just as useful to figure out what the heck didn't work as figuring out what did work. And also what works does change over time, but I have chronicled that on this channel, which is the fun part of AuthorTube. So give this video a thumbs up if you like it. If there's anything I talked about here that you want to hear more about, I'll just ramble on about it. Let me know down below in the comments. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching and happy writing.